Hello, friends, and welcome to today's live level up conversation. Whether you're joining me live or catching me on replay, it is wonderful to have you here. Happy Wednesday, right in the middle of the week. Let's dive right in.
Welcome to Level Up with Winnie Sun. Award-winning financial pro. Get ready. Level Up with Winnie Sun.
Well, hello, friends, or just about like next week's going to be June. Can you believe days have been moving so quickly? For those of you who are brand new to the show, welcome to the show. I'm Winnie, your host, an award-winning financial pro, a Forbes contributor, and a CNBC Council member and contributor. And it is wonderful to have you joining us live here. We're streaming here live on over half a dozen different platforms. So jump in, say hello, and welcome to the show. Well, the market's still open, so let's talk about where it's at currently. We've got a little bit less than 30 minutes left before it closes this Wednesday. The Dow is currently down 178 points. Nasdaq's down 20. S&P 500 is down 16 as well. So pretty much all negative today. So I guess there's a good chance we're going to close off in negative territory. But there's been a lot of financial news, and I want to share with you some of the big stories of the week. If you didn't hear already, one of the big things that's being discussed is this thing called the Big Beautiful Bill. Now, this is being shared on all the different financial publications, but I'm going to quote The Guardian by Chris Stein here, because the House has recently passed President Trump's expansive One Big Beautiful Bill, which is going to include some permanent tax cuts and major immigration enforcement funding as well. And it now heads, of course, into the Senate. I think we're going to get some more information on it this week. Now, some of the key tax provisions are going to be extending the 2017 cuts and adding new deductions for things such as tips, overtime, and of course, US made car loans. Now, that's going to be welcome news, I'm sure, to your favorite restaurant server, because the deduction of taxes on tips and overtime, but many of these are also expected to expire in 2028, these tax cuts. Now, this big, beautiful bill raises the cap on the state and local tax or the SALT deduction from $10,000 to $40,000, which is going to, they say, benefit high tax states such as New York and here in California. Now, it's also supposed to be allocating over $100 billion for immigration enforcement. $100 billion. $45 billion is going to be for detention. $14 billion is for deportations. And another $50+ billion is expected for new border walls. Let me know how you feel about that. Now, the Congressional Budget Office is estimating that this big, beautiful bill will increase the federal deficit by nearly $3.8 trillion, largely due to the tax breaks and, of course, the immigration spending. Now, of course, it's quite controversial depending on how you feel about these tax cuts. Do you like them? Do you not like them? But most importantly, you're getting tax cuts, but it's also adding to the federal deficit. Now, Medicaid and SNAP would also see major cuts, and there's going to be new work requirements, possibly displacing over 16 million beneficiaries combined of those who receive Medicaid and SNAP and probably, applying for that as well. Now, a lot of the previous Biden administration clean energy incentives would also be phased out, and this is going to end the support for electric vehicles and renewable energy by 2031. This big, beautiful bill also raises the U.S. debt ceiling by about $4 trillion to avoid an imminent default. Now, people are saying that this new big, beautiful bill definitely benefits the wealthy far more than lower income Americans. But you have to be the judge of that. And speaking of this, you would think then many of the wealthy would be very happy about it. Well, not necessarily. Yahoo Finance reports today that Elon Musk has publicly criticized President Trump's sweeping spending bill, calling it a fiscal threat that undermines efficiency reforms proposed by DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which Elon Musk oversees. So Elon's disapproval marks his second major policy break with President Trump following his opposition to the administration's aggressive tariffs. Now, you would think maybe that it's just, spiff, the two best friends are agreeing eye to eye, but it's not just Elon Musk. In fact, fellow tech leaders also agree, there's several, that they believe that this could actually cause failure in other areas. They're also calling this decision a failure in leadership. Um, and there other people, of course, are defending the bill. But basically, there's a lot of people in technology that aren't too happy, including, for example, you know what? There's a whole bunch of people. Why let's just say that I'm going to leave their names out because I think if you want to know who they are, it's best for you to go to the article. But let's just say there are people who agree and disagree. But public sentiment, of course, is also shifting. In fact, there was a recent poll that found that about 50% of voters actually oppose the bill when they've been informed that its key components like tax changes and also Medicaid cuts are part of this. But this isn't quite done yet. There's still going to be Senate negotiations, and even some Republican senators like Ron Johnson are promising substantial revisions to this big, beautiful bill. So maybe the big, beautiful bill is not quite beautiful just yet, and hopefully it will get to a point where it is big and beautiful for more Americans. But we will see. Let's see. I see Sadiq is sharing some information about Starship. We're going to get there. Sadiq, we're going to get there. So thank you so much for pointing that out. Now, I also want to share a little bit of news that came out from CNBC today by Jeff Cox, talking about the Federal Reserve. So recently there's a report, minutes report, talking about the Federal Open Market Committee meeting and the meeting they had at the beginning of May. They talked about how the Federal Reserve, the Fed, is concerned that tariffs could reaccelerate inflation, complicating decisions about interest rates. Now, this isn't completely new, but the Fed held its benchmark rate steady at about 4.25% to 4.5%. But of course, they said they were cautiously optimistic. And of course, due to all the fiscal changes and trade policy changes, that officials are now warning us that there is a potential for difficult trade-offs if inflation persists while economic growth and employment weaken here in the United States, citing really that we sort of need to wait and see more. But they're saying that the economy is being described overall as being solid, with some positive news coming out from some areas, but overall, there continues to be concern about trade tensions. Slightly better due to the earlier meeting with the United States and China agreeing to suspend certain tariffs pending negotiations. That, of course, has improved some of the performance in the stock market as of late. But President Trump has pressured the Fed to cut rates and saying that there's been slowing inflation and all that. But Fed Chairman Jerome Powell says the Fed is independent. We're going to keep it that way, and it's a wait and see for now. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's not good when two parties don't agree, but that may not necessarily be a bad thing either. If they can come together, both find ways to better the United States and Americans here and our economic situation and our stock market situation, I think we could all agree that'd be a beautiful thing. So let's hope that that becomes a big, beautiful thing, that they can come together and find ways to lead our country to stronger, better times, and of course, reduce our federal deficit at the same time. Now, speaking of things that did change, one thing that Sadiq had mentioned in the comments here is talking about SpaceX. SpaceX Starship, if you didn't know already, well, there was an explosion. This is being reported by CNBC. SpaceX's Starship system exploded during its 9th test flight. This is now the 3rd consecutive failure for the very ambitious company intended. They're hoping that this rocket will reach, of course, lunar and Martian missions, the moon, and to Mars. But Fortunately, this was a uncrewed rocket, so they did suffer major fuel leak after separation. They lost control, and it disintegrated over the Indian Ocean. But no lives were lost, which is the biggest benefit and biggest plus here. Now, the Super Heavy booster, they said, also exploded post launch. Now, Elon Musk is highlighting partial success, noting that improvements over previous tests, which is a great thing, including reaching the planned engine cutoff and retaining heat shield tiles. And I think we can agree. I mean, these types of things, they're different. It's not something that you're just like driving down the street. And it requires a lot of testing. And although nobody likes seeing rockets explode, this is part of the process. And I think we can all agree we're just grateful that no humans were on that rocket. And so give them a chance to keep on testing and hopefully things will get better. Now, the FAA has confirmed the incident and stated that there are no injuries or property damage, which is great. And they are going to be investigating, of course, what happened with SpaceX, but that seems pretty standard of something that they would do in general. So that's what happened. We'll continue to update you if we hear more on that front. But let's continue on and talking about things that should give you should raise an eyebrow at least. Now, this is being reported by the New York Times. If you didn't hear already, we don't talk about cryptocurrency on this very often. I'm not going to talk about it as an investment. What I talk about instead is a string of brutal kidnappings in France, targeting people who have owned crypto, including family members of entrepreneurs and major influencers, which has sparked a lot of fear and alarm with those involved with crypto. Now, victims have they've been beaten, they've been doused in gasoline, they even had fingers cut off in ransom demands. These ransoms they have been saying demanding like millions. Now, authorities have made multiple arrests, including 24 people connected to a recent attempted kidnapping. But now industry leaders believe that the European crypto regulations requiring public disclosure of personal information may be helping criminals in identifying and locating these individual targets. Now, executives are now investing in high level security. Um, with some spending as much as, like 100,000 pounds a month on personal protection while pushing for safer regulatory frameworks. Now, of course, in many parts of the country, people are thinking of other ways that they can protect themselves. But nonetheless, it does seem that there has been a rise in crypto related violence. And so that's not a good thing. So hopefully things get better. But yeah, I didn't like reading that. And if now that you know about it, you probably are, just be very much aware. Privacy is very, very important with all your investments, but especially in this situation where it's making news, not a good thing. Speaking of changes, I also want to talk about what the Trump administration is now suggesting as it pertains to crypto. The Trump administration, this is being reported on CNBC, Trump administration has rescinded a 2022 Biden administration era guidance that urged caution on adding these types of cryptocurrencies into 401k plans. Now, the Trump administration is removing federal warnings about digital asset risks. In fact, the Department of Labor now says that it's neutral on these digital assets in retirement plans. It no longer requires employers to exercise quote unquote extreme caution as previously advised. Now, critics are arguing that this move signals sort of a green light for a more unregulated volatile assets, such as these digital assets and other things like that, potentially risking retirement savings. So that being said, if this is a direction that you want to go and you're thinking this is what you want to do, definitely work with a professional who's experienced in these sort of matters. And that's probably a good idea. Okay, so that will be my warning. Speaking of things all 401k, I wanted to talk about what's happening at United Health. United Health, as you know, major insurance company here in the United States, is being accused of misusing 401k assets. Yes, this is being reported by Yahoo Finance. United Health United Health Group is facing now a class action lawsuit alleging that it used forfeited 401k contributions from former employees to reduce its costs instead of benefiting plan participants. Now, the suit does claim that United Healthcare Group violated ERISA by breaching fiduciary duties and failing to act in the best interests of its 267,000 um, some 401k participants. And the plan itself holds about $22 billion in assets. So from 2019 to 2023, United Healthcare Group alleged used about 19 million in forfeited funds to lower its matching costs rather than cover administration fees, which plaintiffs argue increased expenses for their employees and the workers who are still part of the plan. Now, of course, United Healthcare Group um, denies these claims, stating that fiduciaries have always complied with ERISA and they're pledging to seek dismissal of the lawsuit. But nonetheless, the company previously settled a related lawsuit for about $69 million over underperforming fund selections in its 401k plan as well. So, yeah, that sounds like a mess, let me just say. And speaking of messes, let's talk about US tariffs. Now, you know what's happening here. You know, there's been a lot of tariffs with a lot of different countries. Well, now it's also shaking global business. In fact, $50 million of a hit is going to just a few companies. I'm going to talk about that. This is being reported by Forbes. Abercrombie and Fitch, now you know that really like a lot of very popular clothing company. Well, they've cut their 2025 profit forecast. They're blaming the $50 million in losses on new U.S. tariffs. And they're joining about 30 other major companies and firms warning of similar impacts. Now, the Trump administration's quote unquote Liberation Day tariff roll off at the time included a 145% tariff on Chinese imports and 10% baseline on others. So a lot of companies, including Macy's and Target and Walmart, they all made changes to their expectations. Even global brands such as Toyota, AMD, and Ferrari, many CEOs, including those at Ford and Apple here in the United States, warned that these different policies and decisions would spike consumer prices for you and I. They would disrupt supply chain and also cause job cuts for Americans. So UPS, Mattel, JetBlue, all Home Depot too, all these different companies are saying that these sort of changes, the tariff decisions, are going to have dramatic impact in the way that they conduct business, the way they hire and retain employees, and also way that we get charged for the things and services and items that we need from these different businesses. So that being said, many companies are already starting to let go employees, but experts are now predicting that up to 500,000 or 500,000 job losses economy wide could happen in manufacturing alone. So, well, hopefully that doesn't happen, and we'll continue to keep close on that story. But these tariffs are expected to have major impact when they come back, because a lot of tariffs are right now in sort of a temporary pause, but that could come back quite a bit if the tariffs come back to those levels again. Now, that being said, let's talk about one thing that a lot of people look forward to during the fall, and that's the Apple event, right? What's going to happen to your next iPhone if you're in the market for one? This is being shared by CNN. We know that President Trump has demanded that Apple move their iPhone production to the United States or face a 25% tariff. Which of course, then what is that going to mean on the price of your next smartphone? Now, maybe you're saying, well, maybe I won't be buying an Apple iPhone. Maybe I'll buy a different smartphone. But I imagine most smartphones these days are not made completely here in the United States. That could impact how much you pay as well. Well, Apple CEO Tim Cook says it's not going to be anytime soon where these phones are going to be completely made here in the United States. And they're saying that for us here in the United States, the phones that we're going to be, if you're going to be buying one in the fall, well, they're probably going to be coming from India. They said that because of the complexity and specializations of overseas supply chains, we just can't do that quickly and at the same cost. So experts say that shifting iPhone production to the United States would actually significantly raise costs, possibly even tripling the retail prices of these smartphones due to the cost of labor, logistics, and of course, infrastructure challenges as well. Now, we know that Apple relies on many of their partners, such as Foxconn, which has a very skilled and very large workforce and efficient systems in place in countries such as China, making a move to the United States really hard to do very quickly. In fact, manufacturing jobs here in the United States have declined significantly. In fact, many workforces lack the training needed for these high precision tech assembly jobs without major automation. So Apple plans to invest about $500 billion in its US presence here, really focusing on research and development, small business training, but not iPhone production. So that being said, I imagine the next iPhone, hopefully they can keep costs the way they are in similar levels, but I wouldn't be surprised if that cost had to go up. I guess it really depends on when the tariffs are coming back, when the pause is lifted, but something to keep in mind for yourself as well. All right, let's talk about another thing that happened in the news. I want to share this with you because I just thought it was somewhat entertaining, but I'm sure not entertaining for those who are involved. This is being shared by NBC News. Did you know that Delta had a flight delay? But guess why? You're not going to believe this. This is Minneapolis. In fact, Delta flight from Minneapolis to Madison actually was disrupted because there were two pigeons discovered flying inside the main cabin before takeoff. Yes. Well, the first pigeon they said was spotted and then it was removed before they departed. But the second pigeon, the second bird, was really, I guess, more clever. And it was hiding and it didn't emerge until the plane was taxiing. Now, this caused sheer panic among those who were flying. Can you imagine being on a plane, thinking you're going on a trip, and there's a pigeon in your aircraft? I would be pretty stressed out too, right? Well, this so that what happened was the flight then had to return to the gate, and a baggage handler had to remove the second pigeon. And the pilot did note that it was his second pigeon incident that day. So I guess Minneapolis pigeons, maybe they're trying to get out of heat. They seem to really like to get into the aircraft. Now, Delta did apologize for the delay, but I think we can all agree that this was sort of a bizarre thing to happen and probably not common. And, I guess some people are saying that the birds were seeking snacks on such a short flight. I don't know. Uh, that being said, there's more happening with travel, and I want to make sure this is on your radar as well. Now, we talked about this a few weeks ago on a previous show, but if you didn't know already, the deadline has come. If you're looking to book a Southwest Airlines flight and you want to take advantage of free check bags, you need to do so soon. This is being shared on ABC News starting May 28th. Southwest Airlines will charge $35 for a first check bag and $45 for the second, ending their really awesome two free check bags per passenger policy. Now, the new fees will apply to all ticket classes except Business Select, Choice Extra, and their Rapid Rewards A-list members. Or if you own a credit card, you should be okay too. But that being said, the change does apply retroactively to existing bookings if altered on or after May 28th. So you want to book and you want your free check bags, you got to book pretty quickly and not make changes to those flights. This is going to create kind of a lot of change. I know a lot of people are disappointed. I subscribe to a lot of travel email and whatnot, and I see a lot of negative comments about how Southwest Airlines, people just really upset about this change. And speaking of changes, I want to get your take on this. This change I kind of like. I want to talk to you about this. This is being shared on BBC News amongst other publications, but Mars, the candy brand, well, they are eliminating titanium dioxide, which, as you know, is a food additive from its US Skittles products by the you know, because of a lot of public pressure. I think this is great. So this enhances color and shine. This was banned by the European Union in 2022 due to potential health risks, but it it was still legal here in the United States and the UK as well as Canada. But this change now aligns with Mars's 2016 pledge to phase out artificial colors, though the company didn't quite clarify if the removal would affect Skittles' appearance or taste. I'm guessing it must, right? Because otherwise it would have changed this along longer. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it's okay. I do think, especially with myself having 3 kids, I think people just get used to it. The red doesn't have to be that pretty. The candy isn't that shiny. I think most kids, they like candy. So I think they're a little bit more forgiving on how it looks all the time. But nonetheless, the U.S. public health debate does continue under the Trump administration. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., leading the Department of Health and Human Services, is now prioritizing food safety concerns. Let me just say, I'm really happy that he is doing this. I think when it comes to food safety, being safe is a great, great idea. What I don't agree with is his policy and some of the changes that he's been leading in terms of the CDC and vaccines and health and things like that. But you know what? You got to be the judge of that. You got to be the judge for you and your own family. So let me know how you think about that. So currently with the Skittles and the red and the shininess, well, the FDA has not yet responded to petitions to ban the ingredient. They're saying that just the lack of enforceable action that they can do. But Skittles is taking that first step, and I think we can agree that's a good thing. So, with that, thank you so much, my friends, for being here with me today and being live with me. Got a little bit less than a minute to go before the market closes. Dow's currently down 249 points in the negative. Nasdaq's down 96 points. And the S&P 500 is down 34. So the market's going to close in a minute. I think we can agree it's going to close in negative territory here. But nonetheless, what isn't negative is you spending the time with me today. So thank you so much for making the time, being here. Make sure if you don't already to subscribe and like this stream and subscribe to get updated whenever we go live. And to check out previous episodes, you can always go on Amazon Fire, who NASDAQ has older episodes as well. So with that, thank you so much, my friends. And if you share this episode online, make sure to tag at Winnie Sun so I can see. And with that, be well, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye now.